In this video, we're going to take a look at the second to last FRQ prep in Unit 9, Stabilization Policies. So it starts us off by saying the unemployment rate in Southland is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. And using a correctly labeled graph of ADAS, show the current equilibrium real GDP, labeled YC, and price level labeled PLC. So before we get too far into this problem, first observe the greater than the natural rate. So that would mean that the unemployment rate in the country of Southland is we'll say maybe 8% currently, and the natural rate is like 5%, right? So that means that we are in a recession. So if our actual rate is greater than the natural rate, that means we're in a recession. So we're going to graph the first part A, down here, as a recession with aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So we have Y for output and price levels, and then we need an aggregate demand and a short run aggregate supply, and we know that the current level is at YC and PLC, but we still need a long run to indicate that we're in a recession. And if we're in a recession, that means output is below the level of full employment. So we're going to put an LRAS above that level at YF. Now, part B and C say the president of Southland is receiving advice from two advisors, Cohelus and Raymond, about how best to proceed. Cohelus says decrease income taxes, and B1 says how would it affect aggregate demand. So B1, aggregate demand, if there was a decrease in income taxes, should go up. And it says explain. So we need to have some sort of reason. So because consumption would go up, we can say that. If it's personal income taxes, it would just affect consumption. Now we'll say part 2, using a correctly labeled graph of the short-run Phillips curve, show the effect of the decrease in taxes. Label the initial equilibrium from part A as point A, and the new equilibrium from the decrease in taxes as point B. So we need a graph here of the Phillips curve. And with the Phillips curve, it's unemployment percent and price level percent. And we know we have a short-run Phillips curve that's downward sloping, and we have a vertical long-run Phillips curve. Now, we have to label some points on these graphs. So the initial point, point A, right, that's going to be a recession. That's the recession. And it doesn't tell us whether the decrease in taxes fully closes it or if it doesn't, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, a recession on the Phillips curve indicates high levels of unemployment and relatively low levels of prices. So it's going to be some point down and to the right from where these two lines intercept. So anywhere on the SRPC down and to the right of where the two lines intercept. So we'll say point A. And then that increase in aggregate demand is a slider of the short-run Phillips curve. So the increase in aggregate demand will mean we're going to slide up the Phillips curve. Now, if you are optimistic and you think they got it right on the nose, you should put your point B right where the intercept is. But realistically, any point above the A point on the SRPC would be acceptable, since they don't tell you in this question how much the income taxes, did they fix it or not. Okay, so now it says part C. We'll do part C down here. Raymond advises the president to take no policy action. What will happen to the SRAS in the long run? Explain. So remember back from Unit 7 that in the long run, the SRAS curve is going to shift to the right. And that's because in the long run, wages and input costs will go down. Remember the phrase, some pay is better than no pay. So we would say SRAS shift right. You could also say increases. And because we haven't explained here, right? We have to explain, because input costs decrease. And you could say wages decrease. You could say a bunch of things. For input costs is probably the best one here, but wages would be fine as well. Using a correctly labeled graph of the Phillips curve, show the effect of the change in SRAS you identified in C1. So then this is part 2. So we're going to say a new Phillips curve, unemployment percent and price level percent. And we have an SRPC, and it says using a correctly labeled graph, let's read this carefully, of the short run Phillips curve, okay, show the effect of the change in the short run aggregate SPY. So actually we don't need a long run curve here to really indicate this for this one. We can have it if you wanted to, but it doesn't really matter. If there is a shift to the right of SRAS, right, that means that the SRAS shifts to the right, that means SRPC will shift to the left. So we'd say SRPC 2. And so that tells us that basically the underlying relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate is changing. Okay, so hopefully this helps you a little bit with problem set FRQ Prep 2. I'll see you next time.